Good afternoon, everyone. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you could please remain on mute during the panel discussion. And if you've got any questions for the Q&A afterwards, just put it in the chat as we go. So welcome to our International Women's Day 2026 panel event. My name is Walker Gravel, and I am a chartered civil engineer and the chair of the M Group Highways Women's Network. It's a pleasure to open today's session and bring together colleagues from across both the nuclear and construction sectors for what promises to be an important and energizing discussion. This year, UN Women organization has set the global theme for International Women's Day 2026 as Rights, Justice, Action for all women and girls. This theme highlights the urgent need to dismantle the legal, structural, and social barriers that continue to prevent women and girls from fully exercising their rights. It's a global call to move from awareness to action, and today's event contributes to that collective effort by exploring how our industries can strengthen equality, representation, and support for women at every level. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the two networks collaborating on today's session. Women in Nuclear WiN UK is a national organisation working to improve gender balance across the nuclear sector through advocacy, visibility, and community support. M Group Highways Women's Network focuses on supporting women across the highways division of M Group by creating a platform for people to share experiences while providing opportunities for training and development. This collaboration actually began last year when Elena from WiN and the nuclear industry joined our Highways Women's Network conference to speak about how to get children interested in STEM. Following that session, it quickly became clear that although our sectors are different, the challenges we face are remarkably similar. We stayed connected, continued the conversation, and today's event reflects those shared priorities. Both nuclear and construction remain heavily male-dominated industries, and the data speaks for itself. In the UK nuclear industry, women represent only 22% of the workforce, while in the UK construction industry, women make up only around 15% of the workforce. These figures reinforce why International Women's Day, and especially this year's theme, is so vital. Achieving rights, justice, and action requires us to not only recognise these gaps, but to work collaboratively to address the cultural, structural, and practical barriers behind them. Today's panel will do exactly that. We will be examining how we can support women experiencing different stages of life, challenge exclusionary behaviours, rethink recruitment and retention practices, enable career progression, and improve work-life balance across our industries. And with that, I'd like now to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves before we begin the discussion. First off, I would like Katie Edwards to introduce herself.
Hello, thank you, Walker. My name is Katie Edwards. I'm the founder of Forest Digby, and I'm here today to talk to you about menopause.
Thanks, Katie. Next up, Beccy Pleasant.
Hi, good morning, Beccy Pleasant. I'm Head of Programme Delivery for the Nuclear Skills Plan, which is a industry government collaboration on how we bring more people in, attract, develop, retain, enable people within the nuclear sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Jenny Wilson.
Yeah, I'm Jenny Wilson. I'm Head of Proposals in M Group Highways division.
Next up, Emily Hutchinson.
Hi everybody, I'm Emily Hutchinson. I'm an occupational psychologist from my business, Applied Psychology, and I'm talking about career progression today.
Thanks, Emily. And now Geeta Bapodra.
Thanks, Walker. Geeta Bapodra, Finance Director for Highways and soon to be Transport, and I'll be talking about flexible working.
Thanks, Geeta. And finally, to introduce my co-host, Elena.
Hi, I'm Elena Bilita-Rasp. I'm the WiN Network Executive, and I'm also working at UK Atomic Energy Authority, and I'm here to help Walker to present this webinar and make sure it goes smoothly.
Thanks, Elina. So first off, we're going to talk about menopause. And I would like to ask Katie the question, how can organizations support support people experiencing menopause and periods?
Yeah, and it's a great question. So I think there are a couple of different layers to this question that we can look at. I think it's from supporting in a quiet way, and then supporting in a loud way, and everything in between. So even having products in bathrooms, I see in lots of different businesses now having products available in bathrooms is a really important part of supporting those who have periods and have menopause, because sometimes it creeps up on us. We don't know when it's going to happen. So actually having that facility can be a really quiet way of a business supporting those people who have menopause and periods. Having support group is allowed a way of doing it. Having open spaces, having educated leaders and managers or peers, so the conversation can happen at different levels, because different people will feel comfortable speaking to different superiors or different peers about their potential symptoms or barriers or challenges. Having policies in place, if that is possible from businesses, is a really big one, and letting people know that there are policies to support those who are going through the menopause is a really, really important one. What's accessible to them? What should they expect from those policies or from the business, versus what are they going to have to drive for themselves? It might even be making people aware how occupational health or internal kind of support networks can help those individuals. I think the biggest one that businesses can drive, and this talks on a real kind of human level, is empathy. Having empathy with the fact that a lot of your workforce may be going through a period of life where they feel like they have lost themselves, where their body is not doing what they wanted their body to do, or it's not doing what their body has always done previously. Sometimes the menopause can feel like you're being gaslit by your own body and brain. So having a little bit of empathy with someone around maybe their behaviour or how present they are, or maybe a difference, and that might be a difference on a daily or weekly basis. And then having the ability to maybe hold that conversation or create a space which is psychologically safe enough for those people to raise their issues, I think is a really, really important thing for businesses to do. There's lots of different things on lots of different levels.
Thanks very much, Katie, for that. Would anybody else like to add to how we can support people experiencing menopause and periods? Yes, Becky?
Yeah, it's really just to reinforce, I think, what Katie said. I think for me, the most obvious thing is conversation. You know, I learn quite a lot from. I've got I've got 4 children, younger daughters, and they are quite happy to have the conversation without any fear or taboo or anything, and it opens up then and gives permission for other people to also have those conversations. I think that it's a simple thing to do, the easiest thing to do, but I think we're all probably guilty. Certainly, perhaps my generation is guilty of hiding things that actually are natural and that we should just all talk about.
Elina, would you like to continue with the next question? Are you on mute, Elina?
Yes, of course. So next question is, how can a business utilize reasonable adjustments to support people?
Yeah, and I think this is a really great question, because it's one of those things where reasonable adjustments weren't made previously for people with menopause, and now it's actually a relatively new thing. Reasonable adjustment is first important to understand what is a reasonable adjustment. So reasonable adjustment is done on an individual basis. So if you have 2 people going through the menopause, the reasonable adjustment may not be the same for those 2 people. And it's to lift a barrier that individual has to doing the job to the best of their ability, basically, due to the situation that they're currently in. So we can apply reasonable adjustments to a number of different things. But when it comes to menopause, those reasonable adjustments might be relatively small. It might be actually providing that individual with a fan on their desk because they feel like they are on fire from the inside out at certain parts of the day, and having a little personal fan on their desk just removes that barrier. It allows them to regulate their temperature a little bit better, makes them a little bit more comfortable. And that might be all that they need. It might be that they need something bigger. So it might be actually that they find it really difficult with the brain fog first thing in the morning. They are possibly, which is another element you might look at, they possibly might have teenagers at home. And so you've got people at home who are fighting those teenage hormone battles. And then you've got somebody as well who's fighting those menopause hormone battles at exactly the same time, because that's how nature loves to throw it at us. And so actually, do we need to move the shift pattern, or can we do a split shift pattern that would support that individual to work better within the confines of the business's needs? Because it's important that the reasonable adjustment is reasonable for the business as well as reasonable for the individual. Is it actually that we can look at things that adjust over time? So at the moment, somebody's, let's say, 37, they've started to have symptoms, because symptoms can kick in as sort of in your mid-30s. And actually that's going to look slightly different to maybe how they're feeling at 42, 47, something might be different. So is it something that we can come back to as and when needed? Is it something that's bigger? So do we need to look at uniform changes? If somebody has PPE that they have to wear and they're experiencing certain physical responses to the menopause, is it that we could allow for an adaptation in that PPE? Or is it that actually we can take that PPE away completely, or, which I know is really difficult in a lot of health and safety situations, or we can actually outsource to a different material or something else that could be more supportive? I think there's a lot of different ways you can utilise reasonable adjustments. Occupational health can be your best friend with reasonable adjustments as well. So knowing that it doesn't have to be what you deem reasonable, go down the route of speaking to occupational health, get some professional references, even speaking to your GP, or if your GP isn't the menopause specialist within your general practice, it might be a nurse. Speaking to your nurse can ask them what they would deem to be a reasonable adjustment based on your symptoms. I think that can be a really powerful thing. And again, going with empathy, going with understanding, having that open conversation, as we've discussed today, can be reasonably helpful. Just to have somebody, one person in your team, understand what you're going through can be a really big thing to support what you may deem reasonable going forward. But definitely include HR when anything's to do with reasonable adjustments. And then if you need also the support of occupational health and some professionals, source those as well. So it shouldn't just be what one person deems to be reasonable isn't deemed reasonable just because the manager doesn't have a great understanding of what the menopause is. So yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any extra advice on this from the rest of the panel? Yes, Jenny.
I think I was just going to reinforce what Katie said about it being really individual. It is really different for different people. So I think even as managers, we need to recognise that as well. So just our experience might not be the experience of other people. So listening and that empathy, I think, is really important.
I think as well you can layer that, right? So if, you know, my menopause symptoms are pretty bad, but I don't have children. So that's going to be really different from somebody whose menopause symptoms are possibly lighter, but they're also having to manage a wider family with more dependents. So actually that could emphasize somebody's menopause symptoms if they've got outside support that they're having to give people outside care. Quite often it falls on women of a menopausal age. So there might be other factors. It might not just be the menopause. It's about having that wider conversation, Jenny. So I think you're really right in saying that just sort of seeing the individual is probably the most important thing when it comes to reasonable adjustments.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I mean, line managers and managers can support, but I think you're talking about emphasizing, and that's something we all can do to help the women going through menopause in meetings, in the office, just helping them get through it. So moving on to the next topic, which is recruitment and retention. So Beccy, how can we showcase visible, authentic female role models without putting pressure on individuals?
Yeah, it's a great question, and on the face of it, it's obvious that we should be promoting female role models. It's a kind of, it's a bit of a cliche now, but you can't see what you can't be sort of strapline, I think is very valid. I think it is really important to focus on that point about authenticity. That I think we are gradually becoming more confident in bringing our true selves to work, but that's not universal, and I think there are still pressures to conform from particularly the younger generation who may not yet feel confident enough to bring their true selves to work. And I think there's a danger by having a few selected role models that we play into the same situations time and time again, that they're presented almost in this kind of status of being a sort of perfection, and that's something that everyone has to sort of strive towards, and then that can actually then end up encouraging people to feel like they have to conform rather than to be a leader in their own right. So I think there is that balance between authenticity and role modeling that we need to be really careful about. So I think there's a point there immediately around, and I think in the nuclear sector, we're probably a little bit guilty of having a few very amazing women that we get out there and showcase every time that we possibly can. And then for most of us mere mortals who look at them and think, oh my goodness, they're never something I can be, that they cease to be as useful as role models. So I think there's something here about broadening the concept, thinking through who we're using as role models and in what situations. I think we typically tend to play senior leaders in as female role models to show people that there's no kind of ceiling to people's progression. But I would have loved to have heard from people who are role models in, kind of perhaps more junior roles or operational roles or things that perhaps more people can start to connect with. I think we're all aware that there is a bit of a broken rung on that career level, that women particularly find that first managerial step more difficult to take than the men in many cases. So I think having more opportunities to promote and showcase people who have just got to that point and perhaps a little bit more accessible than perhaps some of the more senior roles. I think there's also a piece here about visibility. As I said earlier, I've got 4 children, and I was just thinking in preparation for this, but it's probably about 15 years of my career where, because I couldn't engage in as much networking and everything else because of my family and caring responsibilities, I was probably less visible, or not as visible as many others were at that point. So I think we need to recognise that. I am sure that probably cost me opportunities in that period, and that's fine. It's a balance I chose to take, but is there more we could be doing about making visible those people who are perhaps slightly less visible because of their caring responsibility as part of that role modeling and showcasing kind of element? And I think probably the last thing I would say is that the role models are obviously, and I guess it goes without saying, only part of the system. You can't just rely on pinging out a few sort of senior female role models and hoping that will tip the balance. It has to be an embedded kind of piece that is kind of complemented by other things such as advocacy and sponsorship and that kind of thing to do with women as well. So yeah, that's my opening viewpoint. Alina, thanks.
Thank you, Beccy. Any additions to that? Yeah, I think you touched on some important points that Emily will pick up on later, like sponsorship and how that can play a big role in career progression of women. You also talked about getting how we make networking more accessible. And the next question kind of leans into that as well, because what changes to job design or shift patterns would generally widen the talent pool?
Yeah, I think, I do think this is a really essential part of a tool in the toolkit for ensuring that we have diversity. And interestingly, again, I was just talking to my daughter about what I was doing today, and I said, why this is important to women. She said, well, it's not only a woman thing, is it? Actually, kind of shift patterns, job adjustments, job design. Actually equally apply to all genders. Actually, if we make it easier for for men to take time off, then that will then enable women to do more in the workplace, and that kind of thing. So I think it is really, really, really essential. There is, I'm sure a lot of people know this stat, but the CIPD recognise the importance of flexibility. They see it as not a perk, but a prerequisite now in terms of attracting people into sectors. And last year alone, 1.1 million people left their job because of a lack of flexibility. So that's 1.1 million people who have exited when they need not have done. And there's all sorts of productivity costs associated with that are really, really important. So it's clearly a really important part. I think the first thing to acknowledge is that flexibility and job design needs to be explicit in our job adverts. People self-select very early on in the process. You read a job advert, and if it doesn't immediately, and particularly I think this is true of women, if it doesn't immediately talk to you, then you just put it in the box and move on, sort of thing. So I think we're funneling out an awful lot of people that we needn't do by not being explicit in what we can manage here. And there's some obvious things around flexibility of working, kind of compressed hours, 4-day working, that sort of thing that actually are hugely attractive to people in applying for jobs. Hybrid is good, but it's not enough just to control time. There's also a place we also need to control time, I think, in terms of people's ability to be able to invest in the workplace around other commitments. So I think there is a lot that we can think of, but it does then raise that issue around more operational roles or site-based roles where perhaps we think that there is less opportunity for flexibility in those spaces, but there's still things you can do around time. Shift predictability is a huge enabler for people to be able to manage it alongside other responsibilities. So stable patterns, the ability to adjust shift patterns around school times where possible, to book things in advance so that you can plan. Those sorts of things are relatively easy adjustments that can be made that particularly talk to some of those more operational roles where we know there is a massive issue in terms of diversity. Part-time job sharing, these sorts of things. I mean, they sound so obvious that we should all be doing them, but it's really, really important. And actually, at a very senior level, job share and part-time working is still relatively rare in more senior jobs. So I think it's about intentionally designing roles rather than just occasional home working that will really make a difference in this. And just as a personal anecdote, I when my children were young, we had to make a decision where one of us stopped working, and I did the first bit of time for 2 of the children. My husband did the same for the second 2, but it was the only way that we could make it work, because there wasn't that kind of adjustability or flexibility within our ability to negotiate with our employers. And it just seems flawed that you have to take somebody out of the workplace completely to enable that to be successful. So yeah, I think there's lots that can be done.
Thank you, Becky. Anyone wants to contribute more ideas? Yes, Emily.
I just wanted to add, I think, I know I'm talking about career progression, but there is also that penalty for part-time working with career progression, which is another thing that I think we really need to be looking at, because we do know that if people aren't as visible in the workplace, then it does tend to mean that they may miss out on opportunities. So I think there is definitely something structural that we could do around that issue.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, Walker, I hand over to you and the next question.
Thanks, Helena. The next topic is culture change. And I've worked in the construction industry for around 5 years now, and I think it is changing. Even in those 5 years, I've seen it happening. We've been talking more about women on site, for example, in operational roles, and ever since founding the Women's Network in our company, I've really seen those topics being discussed more and more. So the first question for you, Jenny, is how do we address behaviours that fall into the banter category but still exclude or discourage women?
Thanks, Walker. I think this is a really interesting area for discussion, actually, and something that I've thought quite a lot about since we talked about me being on the panel. And it's something we hear quite a lot, isn't it? That it's just banter, so it's okay. But actually, little comments can sometimes have quite a big impact on people. So banter is often framed as harmless, and usually people don't intend to be hurtful. But actually, it's the impact that matters more than the intent. For me, and I was talking to some of my team about this morning, actually, and we were saying that banter only really works when you've got really good, strong, trusting relationships that are already established. And if they don't exist, then banter can really easily start to cross a line and start to have more impact for individuals. So there's something there about kind of trust and relationships and culture in the teams to start with. But also when the joke keeps landing on the same group, so be that women or any other group, it can start to signal who doesn't belong, and that could be a real challenge and a real barrier for people. So it doesn't really matter what the intent is. If it's having an impact on people, then we've got a duty to call it out. And I think that goes for leaders as well, to understand that if someone says that it doesn't feel great, we really need to listen to that and not defend it. We can't just kind of wipe it away and say it's just banter. That's just what happens. So in terms of calling things out, there's a couple of ways I think we can do that. There's one in the moment, and we can do that using simple phrases like maybe that comment might not land well, can we rephrase it? Or I'm not sure that joke's helping the conversation. So we can try and set a boundary without being too confrontational about it. We don't need to make a big deal. We can make those kind of smaller, quieter statements that set those boundaries for us. Also, I think it's really reasonable for people not to feel okay about calling things out in the moment. I think sometimes that's not appropriate, or people just don't feel like they can speak up. But I think what's really important is that you raise it with someone. So whether that be a manager, a colleague, or an ally, we need to talk about it and we need to get it out there. And I think the really key thing in that is that actually, if we let it slide, that sends the message that it's acceptable. And that's how a culture in an organisation gets shaped. It becomes the norm. And I think we'd all agree that that's not what we want. So we've got to be upfront and honest about these things. I also think that our male allies have got a role to play in this as well. So they can speak up in moments when either we don't feel able to, but actually it's not about them speaking up for us, it's about them speaking up with us and standing kind of side by side and in recognising the challenges around this. And I think also, just as importantly, they need to be speaking up when there isn't a woman in the room. So actually, if someone wouldn't make a comment in a mixed group, it probably shouldn't be said at all. And again, I think this can be done in a way that isn't confrontational. It can be as simple as saying something like, would that joke land in the same way if the room looked different? So I think a lot of it is about culture and how we make sure that we all feel comfortable. I think all of us help shape that culture within the workplace. It's really not about kind of slogans that we've got written on meeting room walls. It's about the choices that everybody is making every day. So speaking up is really important. And I think it's really important to say that inclusion isn't about removing humour. This is not what we want in a workplace. We all want to have fun. We want to make work enjoyable. But it really is about ensuring that everyone feels safe and respected and that they feel part of the team.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jenny. You made some really good points about how the team has to feel comfortable with each other for banter to really work and for you to have fun at work. But at the same time, being able to speak out and raise issues that have or comments that have been made. I think you mentioned you can do it directly with that person in the moment, or you can also, I've definitely done it before where I've gone away and thought about it and then come back to that person after the fact. And we've had a very good conversation about that, about why I didn't think it was the right thing to say. And then we can both grow from that. So does anybody else want to add anything to that question? Katie?
I just thoroughly agree. I've spent a number of months speaking to different businesses about the sexual harassment legislation that's come into force, and a lot of banter is raised with that based on sort of a sexual nature of the conversation. And what I find really interesting in the sessions is a lot of people say, well, if you didn't want that said by someone else to your daughter or son, or to your partner, or to maybe your mother or father, why are we saying it in the workplace? And I think it's quite a nice one in terms of landing the impact of saying, if someone said that to your daughter or son, how would you feel? To reflect it back without actually kind of pushing it back into someone's face to get them to see it through a different lens, I think can be quite a powerful way of addressing banter that's not necessarily banter.
Thanks, Katie. The next question is, how can multi-year projects and contracts be used as an opportunity to embed culture change rather than delay it?
Yeah, thanks, Walker. So I think longer term projects and contracts actually provide a better opportunity to embed culture change. They give us time and stability and lots of repeated opportunities to shape behaviours, and we can really kind of bake culture in from day one. We need to make culture part of the contract, so it's not an add-on, it needs to be part of the way that we work. So we can define those cultural expectations right up front, and that can be around collaboration, psychological safety, inclusive decision making, or respectful communication, like we've just touched on. And we can build those into tangible things like KPIs, so engagement scores and diversity of decision making forums. Or build them into things like supplier agreements, and with kick-off material, so onboarding packs and governance frameworks can also reflect the kind of culture and expectations that we want within the business. Through that, we can make it really clear that culture isn't optional, it really is a delivery requirement. And I think there's lots of things within both projects and contracts that give us opportunities to reinforce the culture and the expectations. So through multi-year programmes and projects, we often have gateway reviews and lessons learned. Through our contracts, we'll have annual reviews and refresher training, and all of those provide opportunities to kind of check in on the culture and the direction of travel. And I think the other thing is that long projects usually have a fairly stable leadership team or a leadership group, and they can model the desired culture fairly consistently then over a number of years so that those patterns become the norm. And I think the other thing that we can do is identify informal influencers, so the people that everyone watches, the people that everyone's kind of engaging with and talking to, and make sure that they're on board, and get them to be setting the kind of the behaviours and the expectations as well. I mentioned earlier about kind of onboarding materials, and I think that's really key with the kind of longer term projects and some of our contracts. So usually large programs would bring a wave of kind of new team members or contractors or partners, either through TUPE or through recruitment, and we can build that cultural messaging in right from the start. And we can also use examples to demonstrate what good looks like. So we can take some of our long and high profile kind of programs and projects and showcase them to the wider business, as they can become the kind of success stories that we use to influence other teams. So yeah, I don't think that kind of longer term projects really do delay kind of culture change. I think there's real opportunity in them for us. They give us the time and space to show the kind of organisation that we want to be.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jenny. I think you made a really good point about the lessons learned, because I think a lot of the times lessons learned sessions focus on what we've delivered, and those kind of more tangible outcomes. However, talking about the culture that we're expecting and want to build on a project or a contract is just as important. Does anybody want to add anything to that question? No? Okay. The next topic is career progression. And the first question is, what development can we provide women to progress in their careers?
Thanks, Walker. So I've got three kind of thoughts on this. And the first point I want to make is actually following on from something that was said earlier. This is the advantage of being later on. I can pick up on things that people have already said, which is about the individual nature of this. So one size doesn't fit all. Women are different from each other. Obviously, we know about intersectionality. Again, we don't give that enough focus, actually. But you know, beyond that, we are all different. So that means that actually what we all need to progress will be different. So the second point is really about what seems to help. And we know that individualized development does seem to help. So things like one-to-one coaching, mentoring. So I know women in nuclear obviously support mentoring quite a lot. And also coaching in smaller groups all seem to support career progression. The other nice thing about all those is, of course, they can be delivered remotely. So it makes it more inclusive in lots of ways, more accessible for women. Coaching groups we've been running since 2018, and fairly recent research, I think it came out last year or the year before, showed that you know, working together in small groups really does help progression, even increases the chance of women getting a pay rise, which is always good news for all of us. The third point to make is that I'd always recommend focusing on strengths. So it's very easy to go into the deficit model when we're talking about development, to look at what's not working. And often with women, when we do that, we use men as the comparator. So it's kind of the how can women be more like men? So in contrast, I'd always suggest looking at strengths. So actually, what does each individual, so not just what do all women, but what does each individual bring, and what are their natural talents that they can then apply to achieve the outcome that they want?
Exactly. But yeah, I think it's quite important to talk about the strengths. I personally have definitely struggled to really talk about my strengths, and I don't really understand quite why. And I think a lot of women will relate to that as well as men. And you also mentioned the small groups. And I think that's really important as well, to support each other in those smaller networks, almost, to kind of help each other and provide feedback and support on that career journey. Would anybody like to add anything for that question? Beccy?
Yeah, just I mean, obviously it was implicit in that kind of small group element, but I think this idea of sponsorship of sponsoring women early on in their, well, throughout all their career actually, but sponsoring women, whether that's a male or female sponsor, it doesn't necessarily matter, but just I think women are less able to use some of the other networks than men are. Overly simplifying, obviously, but therefore, you know, kind of encouraging and supporting and having those kind of strengths-based discussions with those individuals, but with that sort of sponsorship kind of approach, I have found really useful, both for myself personally and in me providing that support to others. So I think that I genuinely think we should be doing as much of that as we possibly can accommodate in our workplace.
Thanks, Beccy. Oh, Elena.
I know I'm not on the panel, but
Okay.
I think with the strengths, I mean, I think it's very important because a lot of us, we have the traditional alpha male leader kind of ingrained in us. And for me, at least, it was a revelation when I realized that as a quiet person, I can actually be a leader as well. So I have many strengths like listening skills and other things that makes me a good leader without being out there and really as you would imagine a leader to be, at least when I was a kid. So yeah.
Thanks, Alina. The next question for Emily is, what organizational interventions help progression?
Thanks, Walker. Also, just want to say that a way of getting comfortable with talking about strengths is to talk about what you enjoy rather than what you're good at, which makes it automatically a lot easier. And Beccy, thank you. I'm just about to come on to sponsorship, so I'm absolutely going to talk about that. No, don't worry at all, because you're absolutely right. So, organisational level. So, as an occupational psychologist, I absolutely believe that this is where we should focus more, because I think this is where we can actually have a bigger and more sustainable impact. And along with my day job, I'm also doing a part-time PhD at the moment, looking at this very subject. So really, what in the organisational environment makes the biggest difference for women's progression? And there's a couple of areas that stand out. So again, there's that element of individualised support, so not general support, individualised support. And as Beccy has mentioned, an area that does have real promise and shows more impact is sponsorship. And I think it's important to distinguish between mentoring and sponsorship. So mentoring is kind of more directed towards the individual woman's development, whereas sponsorship is more about someone bringing that woman into the room. So actually it comes at personal risk for the sponsor. There's a lot more action and emphasis placed on the sponsor in that relationship. But it is about kind of bringing that person into a network, positioning them with others, highlighting their achievements, what they're capable of, highlighting their belief in that person's potential. That kind of behaviour, which actually, again, men tend to have more access to because they've got those relationships than women, as Beccy said earlier. And it is important to say that this role is a role that men and women can both play. So it certainly isn't one that just men can play. Women can also play it for other women and for other men. The only point is that men are more likely to be in the position to play it because they're more likely to be the ones in the room already or to have the positions of power and influence. So therefore, they've got more access to that, I would say, but it's absolutely something that they can do. The second area I was going to pick up on, and again, Beccy, I think you mentioned it earlier, was about role modelling. So this has consistently been shown to make a difference for career progression. Again, I would say a role model could be male or female. It's about the range of behaviours. And I think, Beccy, again, you were talking about that. It's about diversity almost in what you see, so that you don't see that all leaders are behaving a certain way. You see that range. We know men can engage girls in STEM just as well as women can, actually, if they STEM in terms of purposes. Oh, sorry, have I just lost my power? Can you still hear me?
We can still hear you,
Yes.
Emily, yeah.
So as long as men talk about STEM in terms of purpose and kind of collaboration and teamwork, as well as
Emily, we've lost you now. Apologies, lost your audio.
difference. And then the last bit I was going to talk about was actually being a role model. So again, there does seem to be a key pathway between being seen as a role model and knowing that you're seen as a role model, and that creating feelings of status and capability in women and increasing their chances of actually going for promotions and career progression in an organisation. So again, I'm very aware that for women, sometimes it can just feel like it's another thing that you have to do on top of everything else. Not only do you have to do your job, not only do you have to try and kind of adapt your behaviour to fit in, but on top of that, then you have to be a role model for other people, and it can feel like it's another job. However, I think the
good thing to know is that actually there could be a real personal benefit for that you do get something back. Research does indicate that actually it can really help you in terms of affirming, I guess, your place and your value within the organisation.
Thanks, Emily. I really liked how you defined the term sponsor, and made me realize that I do have those sponsors in the industry, which is really nice to know. And also how you've highlighted the importance of diversity in leaders, which Alina was also already talking about. I think that's so important to understand that, yeah, you don't have to be only one way to be a leader. Does anybody want to add anything to that question? Okay, thank you. The next topic is work-life balance. And I'll be going to Geeta for this one. So the first question is, how can flexible working be positioned as a productivity and safety benefit, not a concession, especially looking in construction?
Thanks, Walker. You're absolutely right. Flexible working is sometimes seen as a concession, something we allow people to do. But in reality, flexibility is a business strength, especially in safety critical sectors like ours in M Group. And as Becky mentioned earlier, times are changing and the younger generation is actively seeking workplaces that offer genuine flexibility. And for many early career professionals, flexibility isn't just a nice extra, it's the baseline expectation. And when people work flexibly, they tend to be more productive, more present in the moment, and more output focused. Some of the most efficient and reliable people I work with are those working flexibly. So parents doing school runs, carers managing medical appointments, or colleagues facing long commutes. They prioritize ruthlessly and deliver consistently because they have to use their time wisely. So the sector's got a long way to go, and we need to think differently about how we attract and retain people who want to or need to work flexibly. This could mean redesigning existing roles and or advertising new roles with genuine options for part-time hours, potentially job sharing, hybrid working, and to make that clear from the outset. Again, Becky highlighted this earlier. I wanted to talk about retirement as well, because we do have an aging population, and there's a lot of knowledge that's built up over the years. And when people retire, we don't want to lose that all in one go. So can we offer options for the retirees to have best of both worlds by offering flexible working? And when flexibility is visibly supported at every level, we widen our talent pool and keep hold of the expertise that our industry desperately needs. So the benefits of adjusted hours like hybrid working or compressed weeks allows people to show up rested, focused, fully present. And again, in our industry, there's a direct link between clarity of mind and safety. We know that fatigue is a risk factor, and flexibility is one of the simplest ways to reduce that risk. Now, of course, flexible working needs to be managed carefully. We also need to appreciate that certain roles will genuinely offer less flexibility than others. The industry's credibility depends on being honest about this rather than overpromising. I think the fix, again, we spoke about this earlier, is to make it role specific. Each ad should describe what flexibility is realistically available for that role. And candidates, they're smart, they'll respect the transparency, honesty, and they'll apply if they feel that flexibility works for them. So I think for me, the key takeaway is that the flexibility is very important in attracting and retaining talent. We need deep expertise in our industry, and we can only build that expertise if people choose to stay. I think, Becky, you put a fact out there that we lose 1.1 million people because we can't offer flexible working. And for me, that's a real shame. So if we do want to build teams that are loyal, diverse, engaged, and high performing, we absolutely need to look at flexible working as a productive and safety benefit.
Thanks, Geeta. Yeah, you mentioned that flexibility is almost it's an expectation for especially younger generations joining the industry, and realistically, it benefits all genders and any generation, no matter what role they're in. So I think it's such an important thing to talk about. Does anybody want to add anything to flexible working? Becky?
It's just one thing around equipping managers to deal with more hybrid or remote teams. I think it's all very well to offer it, but if you then can't manage in that environment, then you're going to lose the benefit of offering it. So I think there's a developmental piece there for our sectors as well.
Thanks, Becky. The next question is, how do we support people who have been on an extended career break returning to work? This could be due to parental leave or caring responsibilities or sick leave.
Yes, I think many of us on this call would have had some sort of leave at some point, and returning to work after a break can be really tough. As you say, Walker, whether it's parental leave, caring for someone, illness, or any other life event. I've had time off twice to have my children. And from my own experience, the world at work can feel very different when you come back. Confidence dips, systems change, teams change, even the culture can seem unfamiliar. That's why supporting returners, again, isn't just a nice to have, it's a fundamental part of inclusion. First, we need to recognize that returners bring strengths, not weaknesses. So if you've been off for caring responsibility, you would have developed resilience over that time. Running a household builds prioritization. Navigating health challenges deepens empathy towards others. And these are all leadership skills, and we should treat them that way. Secondly, structure really matters. A clear, specific re-onboarding plan, refresher training, a mentor or a buddy can make that transition so much smoother. Phased returns or staggered responsibilities help rebuild that confidence without overwhelming people. Funnily enough, I have a lady who's just come back from an extended career break, and it's her first day here today. So I've been actually working with her to just get IT sorted and, just to kind of ease that person in. And actually, they really just appreciate that support that goes with it. For me, I think one of the things that I need to avoid and others need to also avoid is making assumptions around returners. So examples are someone returning from parental leave wants fewer opportunities, or assume a carer has lost ambition. I can talk about my own experience. So after my second maternity leave, I was told that new roles had become available. And I was gently encouraged to take a central reporting role because it was seen as a safer and more comfortable option for someone coming back after time off. I was genuinely grateful, obviously, to be considered, but I also knew deep down inside that my passion was in supporting the business unit directly. So I did listen to my gut instinct and went for the more challenging role that wasn't the central reporting role. My son is 8 now, and in that time, I've been part of a full business turnaround, a divestment to M Group, standing up a new legal entity, and I'm currently working on an internal merger. And none of that would have happened if I'd quietly been guided towards the safer option. So instead of assuming, the best question we can ask returners is, how can we work together to help you succeed? And when senior leaders share their own stories, we normalize the idea that careers don't have to be perfectly linear. Life happens, and those experiences make us stronger, not less capable. So as we celebrate International Women's Day today, my message is simple. Flexible working helps us work better and safer, and supporting returners helps us build a more inclusive and resilient workforce. So if you can champion both, we strengthen our industry as a whole.
Thanks so much, Geeta, for sharing your own experiences. and also for highlighting the fact that just because you've stopped working in that job and you might be doing something else for a little bit, it doesn't mean that you have stopped developing those skills, and those skills are transferable to the workplace when you go back. Does anybody would like to add to that question? Emily?
It's more to appreciate rather than add, but I just wanted to appreciate the reference to retiring people, because I think that's a really, really interesting, again, a bit of an unexplored area so far in terms of what we can do. Because you're absolutely right. I always think, because I work for myself, it's easy for me because I can kind of carry on forever and just adjust as I go. Whereas, you know, I do see people who are in that employed position not having choice, which does seem a little bit crazy, really, because of that, you know, the opportunity of keeping people to some degree who've got so much experience. So I think that's a really good area to look at.
Thanks, Emily. I'll hand over now to Alina as we move into the Q&A section of the panel.
Yes, so thank you everybody in the panel, first of all. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or if you're brave enough, we are still recording, so if you want to ask your question in person, you are welcome to do that as well. While we are waiting for hands to come up or questions to pop into the chat, we got a question already. Caroline?
Hi. I was just really interested in picking up what Beccy was talking about in terms of role model, and, you know, it was picked up by other panels, but my experience of role models when it comes to female is what the person you put on the podium is the person that's got the most extraordinary trajectory. And I was in that situation about 6 months ago where there was this absolutely brilliant young girl being presented as part of a manufacturing forum, but you know, I can see the sort of, you know, I could see the flip side, that what she was describing would probably feel completely unachievable for so many women, and how much of a turn off that could be, you know, it could be really counterproductive. And so that's, you know, my question is, do you agree that there is something like bad role modeling in effect, and how, you know, whether we should really think carefully about who we put on the stage? And I really like your idea of, you know, supporting people that maybe are quiet, or, you know, but are more representative. And I think it was Emily that talked about that diversity, you know, not everyone has to be an overachiever.
Beccy, Emily, do you want to? Beccy, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, Caroline. I mean, for me, the answer is diversity and range, and you know, having people from different backgrounds, different. I think I can't remember who it was mentioned about. I think it might have been Alina, actually. That kind of different leadership styles as well. You know, it tends to be, again, people who are role models on panels and this kind of thing tend to be the more extroverted leaders, the more people that are more comfortable in that, which makes you then think that that's the only way you can be successful. Whereas I think if we can think, I think we all have a responsibility when planning or organizing things, just to think through the more mundane success stories of people who are just doing a great job, you know, that are equally then a very accessible role model to somebody else. That accessibility, I think, is more important than the standout star in role modeling in many examples. And I think certainly in just in preparing for the answer to this question, it's made me think about what we do in the nuclear sector in this space, and perhaps there's more we can be doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beccy. Helena, you have a question?
Morning or afternoon, yes. I've got two questions actually. So my first question is, obviously we were talking about menopause and the workplace and being menopausal myself, and I'm very vocal about being menopausal because I believe firmly that it's a subject that needs to be widely discussed and promoted within the workplace. and I heard some of the things that we were talking about that we could do, but I still think there's more that we can do as a business. So we have these fantastic EAP programs, which are great for everything else, but there is no menopause support. And one of the things that I find time and time and time again when I am talking to colleagues and other people is the lack of understanding around menopause and what support is available. So there's still a massive misconception about taking HRT and what it does or doesn't do to you. Still a massive misconception with doctors. I was very lucky with my own GP. So many people aren't. And I think as a business that we should be doing more to support that. So providing a menopause line on the EAP so that women can actually call up and get proper impartial advice, you know, so that they can arm them to go back to their GP with the right thing. So it's not just office gossip, if you like, or somebody in the office telling them, but they can actually speak to somebody properly, you know, around it and say, okay, this is what I'm going through, this is what my GP said, what's true, what's not, what support is actually available for me. And second of all, I think more posters around the office, you know, actually talking about menopause. We've got loads around mental health. We do a lot to support men's mental health, which I'm 100% behind, you know, having been a mental health ambassador and done all of that. I know the importance, but the highest rate of suicide in women is in women who are menopausal. The most women that leave the career path is women who are of a menopausal age. The most divorces happen when women are of a menopausal age. And I think we're very fluffy about what we do at work, but I think there should be a lot more in place because we risk losing some fantastic talent that we currently have in the business because there still isn't enough real support there. So I suppose my question is, what are we going to do going forward? Not just having these discussions, but actual real action.
Katie, do you want to comment on that, or anybody else in the panel for that matter?
Happily comment. I'm just aware that I'm outside of your business, so I don't want to steal the light if someone has inside business visual that I don't have. It's a dog going absolutely nuts in the background. He's very passionate about menopause as well.
Thank you. Gemma?
Hi everyone, really good conversation, thank you. It's not really a question, I was just picking up on the discussion that Jenny mentioned about banter and everything like that, and a while back I was involved in a large conversation and it was a mixture of people, and I remember something being said and I kind of thought I needed to pick up on that and just sort of said flippantly, kind of said sort of know your audience, you know, highlighting that there was a woman in the conversation, and then it sort of laughed and carried on, but actually it's thinking what I could have said differently that didn't, that, you know, not highlighting that they could say it if we weren't in the call. So yeah, that was a good thing to think of. So thank you.
Jenny, you want to respond?
Yeah,
Comment?
I think it's always easier after the fact, isn't it, to think about what you should have said or what you'd have liked to have said. But yeah, I think speaking up is the main thing. So you made a point kind of either way. That was a really good start. And I think the message is if that kind of thing continues, then either next time it happens you might be a bit more prepared for it because you've thought about it and reflected on it, or you've got that opportunity to kind of take it to your line manager or a colleague and someone else that can support you in that.
Yeah.
Meryl?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, a really interesting discussion. I was wanting to come back onto the point about flexible working because, like, I think in a lot of organisations it's seen as kind of a special treatment for women, you know, and possibly therefore it's seen as a stigma that you know, women are asking for special treatment. I think what's interesting though is if it is offered more broadly, I think actually a lot of men do take it up. I mean, I know in my last organisation, they started to offer it more broadly, and I think actually it got to the point where almost as many men were taking flexible working as women were to spend time with their young children. But I think the question is more, how can we normalise that in the business, that it isn't seen as just a special treatment for women?
Yes, I can take that one. So you're absolutely right. Look, we as a sector probably haven't fully embraced flexible working. I think COVID has benefited in that sense, where historically, if I take myself and my team, we would have been in the office 5 days a week, but post-COVID, we do more of a hybrid approach that works for us and the business. So in terms of that, although it might not be, reduced hours or whatever, but actually it allows people to have the flexibility to drop the kids or pick the kids up without having those commutes in between. But I think the more we talk about it and the more we trial, the better we'll get. I think we've still got a long way to go. And as I said, I think we need to challenge ourselves when a role does become available, really to say, does this need to be a full-time role? Why does it need to be a full-time role? Actually, could this be a part-time role for two individuals to do a job sharing? And I think there is more and more of that happening as we challenge ourselves. But I think the more people ask, the more we will get better at it. And as I said before, everything needs to be specific to an individual and to the job that they're in. If it's safety critical or they're on site, which requires specific conditions, then of course we need to deal with that separately. Certain enabling functions, there might be more flexibility there. So I think again, depends on the role, the enabling function, but the fact that we're talking about it today, I think is a really positive step in the right direction.
Thank you. So I think we have 2 or 3 more questions, and I think we'll have to stop after that to jump into the breakout rooms afterwards. If you have any questions that have not been answered, please put them in the chat, and we can come back, the panel can come back afterwards, and we can do an FA afterwards. Walker?
Hi. So the question I want to ask is a topic that I've had quite a few discussions with different people in the industry, and it's about quotas. So are quotas actually a successful strategy for promoting that gender balance in those male-dominated industries? And people have very different opinions and thoughts on that. I just wondered what the panel had thought about on that topic.
Emily, you were quick there.
Yeah, only because I've read a paper on that, so I can tell you based on some research. So it's an interesting one. So there is, on balance, evidence that affirmative action, which is kind of like quotas, I mean, it's positively trying to influence how many people of different demographic groups get promoted, and there is evidence that that is helpful. The devil is always in the detail. So the devil is about how it is introduced and how it is positioned and how it is communicated. So obviously it still needs to be strongly positioned that it is about merit. However, it is about correcting bias in the system. So rather than, oh yeah, we just need to have 3 women on this team, so we're only going to select women, it's that's the wrong way of doing it. So obviously it needs to be positioned in the right way, but the evidence suggests that it is still helpful because it kind of helps to just tip the balance and to give it a shove, if you like, to help it go in the right direction.
Thank you.
That's interesting to know, because anecdotally I heard some horror stories when they have put women in positions and it has backfired enormously.
Yeah, so it depends how it's done, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yes. So it's good to hear that you can do it in the right way to make it effective as well. Moving on to Lewis.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, I wanted to follow up on a comment that was made earlier about focusing on strengths. It was a speaker at our inclusion conference last summer who said that companies historically, and every company I've worked for has done the same thing. When you come to your annual performance appraisal, you focus on development areas. And why do we always focus on development areas? None of us are going to be great at everything. Why aren't we looking at where our strengths are and looking to sort of develop them into areas of expertise where in a well-balanced team, you're going to get other people who have areas of strength where there might be others with areas of weaknesses. So I suppose more of a statement for the panel rather than a question or anybody else on this call as an opportunity to take something like that away to review how we do our PDRs. There's always going to be relevant areas of development and learning, and that's a good part of the process. But also, do we give enough focus on areas of strengths when we go through that formal performance appraisal process?
I think that's a really good point, because I mean, companies should be exploiting your strengths. And as you said, working in a team, you will be working with a lot of other people who have different strengths, and together, that's how you make magic. I don't know if anybody else on the panel wants to add or.
I keep on speaking, but I'll just jump in if I can quickly. Just to say, interesting enough, you can also focus on development in your PDR, but focus on developing your strengths. So even with that, you can bring it in, because again, research would suggest that you can develop your strengths as much as you can develop your weaknesses. But if you focus on your strengths for development, you're more likely to actually be energized, and it'll be sustainable, and you will be at your best. So even that way round, it's a good approach to take.
Especially as the comment was made that if you focus on the things that you like doing, naturally that would tend to be your areas of strength, and it should just be a much more positive outcome.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
Hello. I've got a question for Katie, please, in relation to menopause. So you obviously know, because we've been doing quite a lot of stuff in relation to menopause for the business, which is great to start the conversation. As a male, it's still not that easy to broach those subjects. So the question for me is, what sort of advice, hints or tips have you got for the male colleagues amongst us, some on this call, and in the wider business that are not on this call, to be able to talk about the menopause without feeling awkward? Because it can feel a little bit awkward as a man, if I'm honest.
Oh, it's so icky, isn't it?
It's just, I'm not saying this is all about men, but it is just, how do we support the conversations without it feeling really, really awkward and difficult?
And I think you being part of the conversation is so valuable, because menopause happens to you too. If you're living at home with someone who's going through the menopause, perimenopause, or menopause, and has all the symptoms, and you're like, who is this human being I'm living with, right? Or who is this human being that I'm working with, and they were okay, 6 months ago, and now they're not okay. So I think it's a really valuable perspective. Go with kindness, go with curiosity, go with courage. It would be my 3 things. I think, like, go with kindness, I think, leads a lot of kind of conversations. Sometimes also just saying that I don't know, right? Or are you open to a conversation? So not asking for permission, but maybe sometimes that's necessary. But how you open up the conversation can be a really big catalyst for how that conversation goes. So going with kindness, I'm super open about talking about menopause. However, somebody else may find that a step too far. So, are you comfortable talking about this? I would really like to speak to you about it. If it's something you're open to, just almost like checking that boundary. And then we don't know what we don't know. As women, it's not historically been spoken about. I never remember my mum really speaking about it. I think generationally we're getting better, as I think, Beccy, you referenced earlier, saying, your daughters now speak really freely about it. And I know between me and my friends, we kind of go, is this happening to you? It's, oh my God. But it's a relatively new thing that's conversational, if that makes sense, within the sort of society. So go with kindness, go with curiosity, go with courage. And I think just putting yourself in that conversation and saying, I'd love to be part of a conversation with you about the menopause. Is that something you're comfortable with? And almost kind of being a little bit gentle to find out where people's boundaries are is what I would recommend. But please be part of it. I love that you've raised that question, because I think it's really, really important that you're part of it. Really important.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I would like to thank all our panelists who have come here and shared their insights, and not only their insight, they've been doing that in an honest way. So what we've heard today is that change doesn't just happen through statements or strategies or policies. It happens through everyday leadership behaviors, decisions made on sites and on projects, who gets the opportunities, who gets heard, and who is feeling that they are included in the workplace, feel that they belong. And in the nuclear industry and in construction, we don't really have the luxury of ignoring this, because inclusion is just not about fairness, it's about skill shortages, workforce sustainability, retention, safety, and the future resilience of our industries as well. So before we go into the breakout room, I want you to take away this message, and that this culture change is not owned by the people department or by human relations. Inclusion is not owned by women or the minority it concerns. And leadership is not a job title. We can all take part of this. We can all drive change. We can all make the workplace a better place. So remember this, please, when you go out in the breakout rooms. We will take a little 5-minute breaks before we are reconvening. So you will all be placed in breakout rooms automatically. And in there we will decide each team on which subjects we want to talk about. So we will try to answer 2 questions in each breakout rooms. You choose yourselves which questions that will be. About 15 minutes to discuss each question, and then we will reconvene here today. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you in a breakout room in about, let's say, 5 minutes time. So thank you again to all our panelists that have been absolutely amazing today. So Walker, do we still want to take like a 5-minute break, or do we want to just move on?
I think we can just move on, really. We don't have lots and lots of people left in the call, so we could, I guess, ask for some feedback. Do you have the feedback already on the responses to the
I've not been able
questions?
to put my things on the slider. It's closed down. I was just about to copy it over.
Okay, I'll open it back up. I was going to say there isn't anything in there at the moment. It's all right, don't worry, that's back open again now. There isn't anything in there at the moment, but if people want to pop that in, then I can always share in the room if that's helpful.
I've just sent mine in because mine was also not sent in time.
So in my room, we were talking a lot about menopause, the importance of having conversations. Women tend to go to women to talk about menopause, which I guess is kind of natural, but try to open up the conversation to men as well so they can learn more about it. From understood, some men learn about it from their wives when they go through menopause, but it would be good if they learn more about it earlier. I mean, we are in male-dominated workplaces. If somebody's going to pick up on a symptom that you have going through menopause, it's quite likely to be a man who notices the difference just because there are more of them around you. So opening up the conversation and having wider conversation would be very useful. Anybody else? Any facilitator wants to feedback?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of bits. I was terrible at getting anything in Slido. Sorry, we were busy talking, but as you know, Alina, as I do. But yeah, we're talking a lot about flexible working, about the relative benefits, but for everybody, and normalising it. The importance of trying to normalise it, not being seen as a thing for women. It's because men benefit from it just as much as women do, and you need to get that as a normalised thing that for anybody that can ask for it, and it's been appreciated. We sort of slipped onto a little bit about sort of recruitment and trying to recruit people in, which is slightly off topic from those questions, but just thought it was a good bit to share. We were just talking towards the end about the not being too precise when you're recruiting, and yeah, for previous experience and so forth, and look at what's really essential, so that you can get those diverse candidates in. The point was made that when somebody says they just couldn't recruit any women, they couldn't find suitable candidates. That's just it's just not really a decent excuse, is it? They're putting too many prescriptions on there, and there's lots of ways to help diverse candidates to come in who've got great strengths to bring to the role, but may not have 5 years previous experience in nuclear or construction, but they do have the strengths and the enthusiasm and the strength of character to bring something really positive to the role. So it's up to employers to be a little bit more open to suggestions.
Absolutely. Tracy?
Hi, I was a facilitator in one of the rooms, and the majority of our conversation was about one area around the menopause. But what we were talking about was that there are many life events. Menopause is just one of them, and that perhaps that it's understanding that as a general, and then it's kind of for everybody, male, female, whoever, that there are challenges that will impact our work, what we do. Sometimes we might need to prioritize on the days that we're not quite functioning as well, but it doesn't mean we're not working. We might not be front and facing sociable on that day, but we're getting things done at the back end of it. So and around that was probably honesty and possibly promoting that for everybody, that life events will impact us. Menopause is just one of them, and some honest conversations around that self-awareness and impact. And that impact isn't always negative.
No, thank you. No, that doesn't have to be a negative impact all the time. You're right, and we have to try to see the positives in the things as well. Any other facilitator wants to come?
We were also talking about. Oh, sorry, Megan, I jumped straight in front of
No,
you.
carry on. You carry on.
We also talked about menopause, and particularly about the differences of feeling comfortable talking to your line manager if they're a woman or a man, and how that has influenced people discussing their symptoms at work. So yeah, that was also very interesting. Sorry, Megan, carry on.
No, you're good. My group had a really good discussion actually. We mainly spoke about work-life balance. And they were saying about it being a misconception that it can't apply due to operational pressures, but is there a way that we're able to dispel the myth? Are we able to trial flexible site patterns, allow for a bigger team? And they were talking about where did I put it? More experienced gangs to trial it on. So then having flexibility of numbers, so that if someone did have a more flexible pattern, then there's less of a worry with like handovers, and missing information with handovers, and then having safety issues follow on from that. So yeah, it was really good open discussion actually within the group, about how we can trial for that, on certain projects and certain levels of projects. But also it ended up with basically, if COVID never happened, would we be as flexible within the office as we are now? Which sort of opened for a good discussion as well. And that technology and the mindset of younger generation will be probably what changes a more flexible site-based work pattern. So yeah.
Alina, you're on mute.
Thank you, Megan. Yes, it's a really interesting question. Where would we have been? Where would we be now if COVID hadn't happened? I think we would probably be very much in the same place as we were previously. Penny?
Our group also spoke about menopause quite a lot. I think it's quite a big topic of discussion. And we sort of raised some ideas of how we can support women in the workplace. So as previously mentioned, EAP support, posters to raise awareness. I think when you're approaching perimenopause or even menopause, you actually just sometimes don't know the full extent of all the symptoms. So raising awareness so that you understand that actually that could be what you're going through. Creating safe spaces for people going through menopause, champions that could help to break down the barriers for those that don't know how to get the support, don't have the women colleagues or women in their life or medical support that they can ask for what's happening to me, and have that conversation.
Yeah. No, those are all very important things that we need to think about and incorporate. And yeah, having the employee helpline program have a menopause line, I think is a very important addition to what they can offer. Adam?
Yeah, I was a facilitator of a room, and I'm mindful that we've gone past the 2 p.m, so I will just kind of sum up a few key points. But there was a really good analogy raised on the call about work-life balance. It's Carolyn in my breakout room had said she compares it often to like a dropped curb, which I giggled at first, but it made sense. It's like a dropped curb, right? You think it's for maybe a parked car to sort of go to a driveway, but actually people with a wheelchair or a pushchair can benefit, right? And work-life balance is much the same. If you really instill wide flexibility in roles that benefits a lot of people, it will normalize it, and it will make those conversations easier for people when they are a parent, etc. Because that's the typical kind of myth that gets thrown at it, right? But you've got people who are carers and other reasons, whether that's male or female in the business. So I thought it's just a really good analogy and like positioning of that. That was one of our key points from our room. And another one, maybe to pick up on culture change, because that was our second focus area. Katie made a fantastic point about behaviours and how culture is driven by the worst behaviour that a manager is willing to tolerate. And it's like how that is made clear and communicated well is really important, and that actually speaking about and vocalizing lived experiences is the way to do that, because then you can actually say like that's not cool, or this has happened to me, this is why this is no longer acceptable. So yeah, really important points I think out of our room, but really good discussion.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Any other facilitator that we have missed and who would like to make a short statement? No. Okay, so thank you everybody who are still here. It's been great to have you here throughout the whole session. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you have gained some insights. So my challenge before we leave here now is don't leave today inspired, leave accountable. We have learned a lot of things. We've gotten a lot of ideas of how we can actually take action. So one final question to you all before you leave, if you can please put in the chat one actions that you will take today or start taking today to move the gender balance, to achieve gender balance and better diversity inclusion in the workplace in general. So thank you very much for joining us today. Please put that in the chat. I'm looking forward to reading it all. So Caroline has already done it for us. So It says focus development discussion on strengths rather than areas for improvement. That's a great one. So yeah, I will start reading them out as you are putting them in. So thank you, Gita, for joining us. It was great to have you on the panel. And with that, yeah, thank you, everybody. I will leave you to get back to your day job. And I hope to see you soon at some other event. Help colleagues to have conversation about reasonable adjusting, removing barriers. Yes, that's great, Adam. Continue supporting MHD women's networks. We can make a difference along our allies in the conversation. That's Penny, yes. Follow up on the option for trialing flexible working within our projects. Another great one. Thank you, Tim, for volunteering that. Thank you, Gemma. Speak freely to male colleagues about menopause symptoms. Yes. Encourage more discussion about symptoms of menopause and periods. Walker. So a lot of people want to start talking menopause to their male colleagues. So male colleagues, be prepared. There are lots coming your way here. Listen, improve my understanding and have a collaborative space to help develop our culture in M Group. Yeah, thank you, Timothy, for volunteering that. Look how we can make job adverts less specific to encourage diversity in potential candidates. Thank you, Selvin. So you still seem to be very keen on staying here and listening to seeing what all the actions are that people are taking.
Gonna have to go, Alina. Cheers. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks
if
all.
you need to drop off, please do so.
Thanks very much, Alina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.